Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. The story begins during the Bakumatsu era. There was a sickly girl who was dying in a samurai clan. A divine revelation was bestowed. After many generations, a blessed body will be born to a sage who will save the world. Soon after, the miraculously recovered girl gathered those who worshipped the god alongside her to form a congregation. Perhaps because they originated from a samurai clan, their philosophy is rather warrior-like. According to them, miracles are self-determined. Say hello to Mummy everyone. The scene changes to a view of a magnificent-looking mansion. A man with prayer beads in his hand is speaking. Among us we pass on a teaching he preaches. This man was the founder of God and man as one. His name was Yamagami Judo. He sits in the middle of a pool on a throne, surrounded by his fellow followers and angel statues. He tells them that they cannot fall under your umbrella. This was directed to the bald man who has a tattoo on his head. The tattoo is translated to mean founder. Judo continues to say that as God's teaching forbid violence and conflict, to forbid obtaining wealth from those methods, to value inside all humans, exits part of God to become as one with God. But the bald man cuts him off saying, bullshit. The bald man who was giving off major Big Daddy vibes was the founder of another religion group called the God and Earth Reverence Church. He was called Urabe Sutra. He repeats what Judo said about value and property. He tells them that it was just an excuse to gather donations by telling believers to throw away wealth. With such wickedness, to say that God exists in you is absolutely disgusting. I want to throw up, said Urabe as he stands with massive booty cheeks ripe for collection. Judo then questions him by saying that such words of praise, what kind of teaching might the God and Earth Reverence Church have? Judo tells him that it was really simple. Rely on God for nothing, using your own body realize your desires yourself. Essentially, miracles are self-determined. Miracles are self-determined, as their God Matama-sama is the world's strongest, greatest, and absolute God. Our muscle daddy grips his fist so hard that an aura started to form around him. He continues to tell Judo that the favor inhabiting the bodies of her believers rests as a power that is unwatched. Judo remains silent for a moment after hearing those words, but he soon bursts into laughter. The world's strongest and greatest, he shouted as he asks our muscle daddy if he was child while still laughing madly. He begins to stand up from his throne, telling him that it was good to have so much faith in his so-called Matama-sama favor. Judo decides to display a miracle of his own to our muscle daddy. He claps his hands together and his feet could be seen hovering over the water. Judo was in a praying position while being right above the waters as if he was floating by divine powers. His followers couldn't believe what they were seeing and called it a miracle. They continued to cheer on that Judo was able to stand over the water. It was something that flesh and blood from humans couldn't do. A wire trap could be seen in the ceiling which was attached to the back of Judo, but most of his followers were too blind to see that. As they continued to cheer him on as a miracle, they even go so far as to proclaim him as their one true God. After hearing the cheers from his followers, Judo asks a question to Muscle Daddy, asking him how it felt to witness a miracle right before your very eyes. But our Muscle Daddy wasn't like anyone else. He calls out that there was a piano wire attached to him and that it was no miracle. He then shouts out a name, Kayamaru. A loud crunching sound could be heard once that name was called. Muscle Mommy has arrived, gentlemen. Feast your eyes on this magnificent sight. All hail Muscle Mommy. Comment below Muscle Mommy. Kayamaru had finally arrived and had pulled the doorknob right of the door with ease. She was the department head of the God and Earth Reverence Church, Urabe Kayamaru. Muscle Daddy then orders her to show the sham religion what a real miracle looks like. She proceeds to throw away the doorknob to the side and took a step on the ring surrounding the water, which began to crack under her Muscle Mommy aura. The author has blessed us with another look at our Muscle Mommy. Let's us take a moment to appreciate the artwork. Judo was surprised to see her stand still. He then asks her if she was going to perform the same miracle, which was impossible if no preparations was done. But his eyes soon gains back his pupils as he witnessed something shocking. Massive explosions could be seen at Kayamaru's feet as the water below her started to flow everywhere. Judo's followers were shocked to see that she was able to stand on water, which was the stand miracle as Judo. But one of them realizes something as they took a closer look at her miracle. They discovered that Kayamaru was just constantly kicking the water so fast that their eyes couldn't keep up, giving off One Punch Man vibes. The followers continued to be amazed as they wondered if a human could really do something like that, making it a different kind of miracle. Judo started to panic as he could see his followers being amazed. He then decides to show off another miracle called God and Man floating as one. which was just being in a lotus position and raised higher into the air, but his pupils returned once again as he looks up and sees something alarming above him. Kayamaru had appeared high above him with her leg raised up high. Her face looked like a predator about to chomp down on its prey. She looks at him with a serious tone in her eyes. "Your miracle can only go that high?" she asks, as Judo started to sweat as he wonders if what she did was really a miracle or just a really high jump. But his thoughts were literally smashed to bits as Kayamaru spin kicks in the air with ease. He lands head first into the pool of water. His followers called out to him with concern and shock that their founder had lost. Muscle Daddy began to speak out to his followers, telling them that the miracle they just witnessed can be performed by anyone with training, meaning that miracles are self-determined, and that their god Matama-sama will bestow upon them the true miracle of transcendental power. He continues to tell that their teachings on obtaining power into the God and Earth reverence church, hence they must convert. Judo's followers began to beg our Muscle Daddy to let them join his religion instead. They continued to chant the words, get big, as Kayamaru just mindlessly stares into space. Muscle Daddy then approaches her and thanks her for the job well done as they have now gained more believers, but she tells him to keep his thanks. Her face brightens with a bright smile as she tells him to hurry and let her see her little brother, but a shocking revelation came to Muscle Daddy. He looks down with concern and tells Kayamaru that there was something he needed to tell her. She exclaims in excitement and asked if he had finally agreed to the marriage between her and her little brother. But Muscle Daddy tells her that was not it and that what she wanted was a legal issue. With a calm and serious tone, he tells her that her younger brother had passed on. Her eyes opened wide as the words entered her mind. "What?" she said as the room grew silent. The followers watched in silence until blood began to drip on the floor. A hand was grabbing onto Muscle Daddy's face with blood flowing everywhere as he pants heavily. The hand had belonged to Kayamaru, who was holding him up with ease. The followers began to stare in disbelief until Kayamaru tells him to give him back. She gives off a serious face as she continues to tell him to give back her little brother. Muscle Daddy tried to explain to her that her younger brother had went on a mission for their congregation, and had went on a journey to Matama-sama's side. But he did not die but instead went to the typical other world. But who gives a shit? Kayamaru tells him, her face filled with more seriousness as she tells him that she was going to marry her younger brother. Muscle Daddy could only think that she was not getting it. He noted that their congregation was nothing but meatheads, but Kayamaru was a step above the rest and wondered how things had gotten like this. She started to look for something in her pants and began to pull out a bunch of photos. She tells Muscle Daddy to look at the photos that she carries with her everywhere she went. It was her precious collection. The photos contained images of her younger brother from young and sometimes in the toilet, and even when he was bathing. Kayamaru continues to tell Muscle Daddy that her younger brother would follow her around when he was small, calling her Onee-chan, and that they would get married when he got bigger. Kayamaru begins to pant heavily and blushes heavily. Muscle Daddy tells her to calm down since he was no longer of this world. But Kayamaru was in her brother-obsessed mood. She swings him around while calling her younger so cute. Muscle Daddy begs him to stop and finally tells her that there was a way to meet him. It was for her to be transferred to another world as well. But soon a crack sound is heard. Muscle Daddy was finally thrown outside a window. He screams in horror as he began to drop fast towards the ground. Kayamaru Simplified watched from the broken window. She repeats the words "another world transfer." Bubbles began to form in the water. Judo was finally dragged out from the water. Kayamaru flings him to the side. As he coughs up water, he tells her that he had almost died, but Kayamaru calls him a scammer asshole. Before asking him what another world transfer was supposed to, he stares at her in silence before explaining. The scene changes to our old friend Truck-kun, who is the main character in almost everywhere Isekai manga. A driver was seen dozing off, but he soon realizes something. There was a figure on the road he was driving on. Is there someone in the middle of the freeway? He shouts just as the figure was revealed to be Kayamaru. She looks at the incoming truck with dead eyes and a serious face. The driver soon realizes that he couldn't press the brakes anymore in time. So instead Kayamaru became the brakes for the truck as she slammed her body against it. The truck was instead sent to another world as it flips through the air, and soon crashes. Judo shouts at her from the bridge and told her that she was supposed to die. But Kayamaru tells him that people don't die from getting hit by a truck. He continues to tell her that she couldn't transfer to another world unless she dies. He continues to beg Kayamaru to die as she stood still. From that day onwards, Kayamaru became determined to die by trying anything. A crazy man appears with a knife in his hand. It pierces something but somehow snapped in half. Kayamaru had attempted to die by getting stabbed in the stomach by a street thug. She had jumped down a cliff and fought a bear. She even consumed large amounts of drugs and burning charcoal inside a car. She even resorted to covering herself in gasoline and lighting herself on fire. She worked at an extremely abusive company and joined a death march, working day and night for an entire month, aiming for death from overwork, but none of it had any effect on Kayamaru's body of steel. Judo appears with a bunch of muscle daddies behind him. He tells her that they had fully recognized the extent of her life force, and that to reach her goal they had no other methods remaining. Kayamaru could now been seen buried inside a barrel. This was the God and Earth Reverence Church's rites of creation. Muscle Daddy explains to her that it was originally only for the next founder to undergo this sacred rite and that she had no such qualifications at all. He continues to explain to her the reasoning behind the sacred ritual, but she decides to cut him off. "You gonna kill me or what?" she said with a serious and dead look on her face. Muscle Daddy begins to shout out, "We call upon the our one true God. We call upon the Matama-sama, heave ho, heave ho." They shouted as they stood near a cliff. The group was carrying Kayamaru while she was still inside the barrel. Her face was filled with joy and a little bit of perverseness. As she finally realizes that she was going to another world, "Bon voyage Kayamaru-sama," the group shouted as they finally threw her down. A big splash is seen as the group continued to watch from the cliff. Judo then asks Muscle Daddy if this was going to kill her, but he looks up in the air and tells him that it won't do. Tears drip down his face as he thought about her overflowing passion for her younger brother along with the power of love, but it turns out that both men were crying due to the fact of how scary she was to both of them. But deep in Muscle Daddy's mind, he absolutely did not want Kayamaru to go to her younger brother's side. Kayamaru could now be seen still stuck in the barrel. She had appeared in a whole different place. She looks around and wonders if this was supposed to be another world, but she brushes that thought away as it looked familiar to the countryside. A shadow soon covers her and she turns to see what it was. It was a massive reptile-looking dinosaur mofo. Kayamaru continues to stare at it while still being stuck in the barrel. Muscle Daddy was concerned about Kayamaru's strength just as the reptile dinosaur began to attack. It was because her strength was a cheat itself. Kayamaru manages to break free from the barrel and knocked out the beast with a single punch. Her cheat was so strong that she didn't even need Matama-sama if she were to meet her younger brother. Then his mission and their congregation's divine mandate, all of it will come to ruin. Kayamaru had managed to easily overwhelm the beast as she stood victorious over its corpse. She looks from beyond the cliff and knew that her younger brother Yukito was somewhere in this world. A smile grew on her face as she spoke these words. "Right now Onee-chan's coming to get you." She continues to sit around saying that Yukito was somewhere in this world. She tells him to wait for her as she will soon find him. She acts out about how he would say "I love you" the moment she appears in front of him, and that they will get married. Kayamaru was ready to accept the part that Yukito has, a part that every guy has, if you catch my drift. She screams at the top of her lungs while being on top of multiple dead beasts. "I'm ready to get pregnant." She continues to chant Yukito's name to the point when she started to blush heavily. She soon calms herself down while breathing hard. She was getting wet just thinking about it. This is what the author wrote, not me guys. She soon realizes that the first thing she needed to do was information gathering. A huge fire could be seen in the distance. Villagers are running away as their town is set in fire. They struggled to get out of the town as the fire had spread everywhere. They were calling out for help any way they could. A voice calls out to Naya as a hand pulls another. Two young kids, a boy and a girl, are seen running away together. The boy was called Noru while the young girl was called Naya. He tells her to not let go of his hand and to follow him. But Naya asks him about how their entire village was suddenly set on fire. Noru tells her that he didn't know what had happened as by the time he realized it, the village was already on fire. They continued to run away as they needed to find a safe place, but Noru soon bumps into something hard. He holds his face in pain as he asks the person why she was just standing there and not running away. Kayamaru appears with her muscles flexed and asked the kids if they had seen her younger brother. Noru was too stunned to speak. He breaks out of the trance and tells Kayamaru that she needed to get out of here due to the fire, but she remains adamant in finding her brother as she explains to Noru that he was her fiancé. She pulls out a photo of him sleeping in his pajamas while holding onto a teddy bear. She then asks if he was pretty. Noru reluctantly agrees but immediately snaps at Kayamaru, wondering why she was showing them a photo when there was a fire going on. Kayamaru explains that when she was exploring other countries and remote regions, the local people rebelled and many times entire settlements were burned to the ground. She thinks about how the village being set on fire was a familiar scene. Noru could only wonder about what she was saying before Naya calls out to him. She asks him what was wrong and who he was talking to. Noru tells her that it was nothing and that he had just met a crazy woman. Kayamaru takes a closer look at Naya and realizes that she was blind, but it was then that Noru realizes something was wrong. He immediately grabs onto Naya and flung themselves away. He yells out, "Watch out!" Just as a huge explosion appears in front of them, the kids fall to the ground just as a voice could be heard laughing out loud. A woman with two very big reasons to like her appears. She shouts out, "Burn, burn," while laughing out loud. Noru protects Naya and questions who the weird lady was. He wonders if she was the one who was burning the village. The lady asks Noru if he didn't know who she was. She then introduces herself as the Archon of Fire, Lord Hephaestus. Both Noru and Naya were alarmed. To discover who she was, Naya began to recall who exactly she was. A unit directly under the Emperor's command of the Imperial City Army, rumored to be a group of xenomorphic superhuman. Noru yells at her about why she was doing this, but Hap tells him that not long ago, the Imperial capital was destroyed by an Archaeans rebellion. The Emperor was dead too. Since then the country had become a battle which the Warring States period began. Hap had then decided to take control of this village, but the village chiefs didn't agree to her demands, so she decided to show them what she could do. Noru remains silent overhearing her horrible excuse, but he soon opens his mouth to blame her. Her reply was a straight kick into our little man's body. Naya calls out to Noru in concern. Hap continues to tell him that half the people in this village will be killed and will serve as an example, where the others would be slaves. Since the weak follow the strong, that's how the world works, she says. While showing off her fire skills, Noru tries to stand up as he tells her to leave Naya alone as he didn't care about what would happen to him. A true man, Hap tells him that he was being annoying, as he reminded her of a guy called Yukito. She recalls that even though he was a weak person, people for some reason would think he was equal to the Archons. Hap began to feel pissed off about recalling Yukito's face and decided to make Noru into a slave. She then proceeds to burn everything right here right now, but a voice calls out to her. Kayamaru appears with her clothes slightly burnt. She wore a calm expression on her face as she asks Hap if she knew her brother. Awkward silence filled with burning village as everyone stared at Kayamaru. Haps was surprised to see that Kayamaru was fine as she made sure to turn her to charcoal. Kayamaru continues to question her if she knew where her brother Yukito was, but Haps decides to not answer someone who was about to die. She flings a fireball straight towards Kayamaru, who sees it coming. She turns into demon mode and kicks the fireball right in its ball. The fireball explodes in midair. It shocks Haps and the kids. Kayamaru explains that if you cut off the air with a kick, then the flames will be extinguished. That is the law of nature. Kayamaru then poses in a high kick stance in front of them. Haps began to panic as she couldn't believe what she just saw. Any superpower is meaningless in the face of overwhelming force, because miracles are done by force. Haps shouts at Kayamaru to not F with her. She begins to cast even more flames, telling her that the Archons should become the gods of this world. Kayamaru's reply was simply a face straight to her ugly face. She had entered demon mode once again, sending Haps flying through the air with a single punch. Haps was knocked out as she crashed. The kids stared with open mouths as Kayamaru questions Haps about God. "My only god is my brother Yukito," she proclaimed as her fighter spirit appears around her. Haps continued to lay on the ground flat. After tasting the wonderful punch from Muscle Mommy, she soon regains consciousness and said it was impossible. She gets up and wonders how there was a human that was stronger than her. She swears that it's impossible and that she was going to kill Muscle Mommy right now, but her eyes widen as she looks at what stood in front of her. Kayamaru was unleashing an ungodly amount of Muscle Mommy energy in front of Haps. Her eyes continued to shine bright, like a diamond in the sky. She towers over Haps as she continues to lay on the ground staring at her. Haps could only think of her actions being useless as her instincts were telling her something. "Surrender, you can't win," was written all over her face along with the print of Kayamaru's fist. Muscle Mommy begins her interrogation asking Haps if she knew her younger brother Yukito, as she had just called him weak. Kayamaru glares at her asking what she meant by him being weak, but Haps immediately throws herself towards Kayamaru and hugs her tightly, just like how I imagine most of us would do if we were in the same situation. She starts to call Kayamaru Onee-sama. She cries out to her that she had finally found a person that she could truly respect, so she continues to beg Muscle Mommy for permission to be called Onee-sama. The kids could only look in awe, except for the little girl. She is blind. Haps continues to argue that in this world, strength is everything, as her face is filled with determination and her fist raised high up. She continues to proclaim that Kayamaru was stronger than anyone she knew, and that Haps was willing to follow her for the rest of her life. But Muscle Mommy grabs her by the collar, telling her that she had made fun of her younger brother. This sin is worthy of death. Muscle Mommy looks ready to eat someone up as she continues to glare at Haps. She immediately tells her that about her younger brother Yukito. She started to praise him, saying that she knew he was different from everyone else from the beginning, even going so far to say that he was really shining and has an amazing aura, and that she could even feel the charisma. An amazing god, simply divine, Haps shouts. Kayamaru's face began to break down. A satisfied look came across her face after hearing the many compliments she gave about her younger brother. She lets her go, telling her that she understood it well. She begins to compliment her younger brother as well, saying that he wasn't just charismatic but that his cuteness and loveliness was also divine. She tells Haps that when she sees him, his divinity will blind her. Haps looks at her with a smile and constantly agreed to whatever Muscle Mommy said. But Noru spoke out asking them to wait for a moment. He shouts at them on why Kayamaru was getting along with Haps. He complains to her that she had burned down their village and killed everyone along with it. She had even tried to kill Kayamaru, but Naya pulls onto his sleeve and tells him to wait. She explains to him that the smell of smoke was fading and that it could mean that the fire was out. Noru was surprised to hear this just as a heavy footstep appeared. A group of men holding buckets in their hands appeared while wearing a white long coat with certain characters written on it. Noru was alarmed to see these guys and wondered who they were, and when they came, "OSU," shouted one of the member, "as you ordered we put out all the fire." The group of men shouted together in unison. One of the members continued to report that all the villagers were safe. Noru continues to be stunned just as a hand appears calling out to him. A group of villagers appear from amongst the ruins of their burnt village. They called out to Noru and Naya, asking them if they were okay since the fire was put out. They told the little kids that almost no one was hurt and that they were all right. Noru began to tear up upon seeing that his fellow villagers were doing okay. A heavy footstep appears once again with an order to listen. Haps shouts at the top of her lungs, "We, Olympus, submit to this lady." She orders her men to follow Muscle Mommy. She then declares that if anyone has any complaints, then they should step forward. But none of the men stood forward as they held their positions. "All right," Haps shouted. "From today on, Muscle Mommy is our new leader," she proclaimed. The group of men bowed their heads towards Muscle Mommy, telling her to treat them well. They began to chant her name out loud. "Muscle Mommy, Muscle Mommy, comment below Muscle Mommy." Kayamaru holds a smile on her face as the group continues to chant her name loudly. She then decides to pull something out. "Look at this," she said as she held a photo of her younger brother sleeping when he was a kid. She tells them with an excited look on her face that this was Yukito, her beloved younger brother, whom they should worship. The group rejoiced together upon seeing the photo. "Yukito-sama Banzai, Yukito-sama Banzai." They continued to chant. The members began to call him their savior, a shining star of hope with divine charismatic. Noru and Naya could only watch silently in the background as they wondered what was going on. But Noru was still confused by something as he yells at them. He questions them about the reason why they saved the village even though they were the ones that attacked it in the first place. Haps hears this and decides to answer him. She tells her that in order to get followers, she needed to do this. Muscle Mommy was curious about the followers and asks her to explain. Haps tells her that formerly this country was ruled by an emperor and a parliament in the imperial capital, and that was when her young brother appeared suddenly like a comet. Then all of a sudden the emperor was crushed all at once. Kayamaru was impressed to hear this news. She nods her head slightly as she tells them that it was expected of her Yukito to be able to take the king's head all by himself, and because of that, after the emperor's death, to become the strongest soldier in the country. The archons have begun to fight for power in various places. Haps tells her that she was one of them, but Kayamaru interrupts her by saying that she was a bit weak. Haps tells her that wouldn't have lost against anyone else but her. She continues to explain that an archon's power grows with the number of followers, so the archon desperately created a cult and started to gather followers. Her members once again rejoiced out loud that they were her followers. They shouted out that they follow those who they admire and respect, so they decided to follow Haps. Kayamaru began to think about what Haps said. She realized that in this country there is an internal conflict for power between religious groups. "Screw you, for such a selfish reason," shouted Noru. He tells them with a fierce voice that attacking a village and setting it on fire was unacceptable. Haps shrugs him off and asks him if he was with Muscle Mommy. Noru tells her that he wasn't, but before they could start fighting it out, Muscle Mommy tells them to wait a minute. She tells them that the reason behind everything was because of her younger brother. She closes her eyes and informs them that it was the sister's job to clean up her brother's mess, but if it's cute Yukito's butt, I'll lick it up instead of wiping it. Muscle Mommy says these words as her mouth begun to drool upon thinking about it. Once again, I repeat, this is what the author wrote, not me. Licking, 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 she repeated, every inch of it, before giving off a creepy laugh. This is what the author wrote. Everyone continued to stare in silence upon hearing those words. Noru started to sweat as he wondered what he meant by that. Muscle Mommy grips her hand tightly, telling them that she finally knows what to do. She will smash all the archons and unite this country, she said with a lustful and drooling look on her face. Noru was shocked to hear that, but Kayamaru continues to talk about when her younger brother would become the ruler. He will create a law that brother and sister must become husband and wife. Once again, I repeat. Author wrote this, not voice of Manhwa. Her face blushes heavily as she drools over the thought of Yukito and her getting married. An image of Muscle Mommy in a wedding dress carrying her younger brother in princess style came up in her mind. Noru was too stunned to speak as every hole on his face opened wide with a shock expression. But Haps and her followers simply rejoiced out loud and cheered Kayamaru on with her vision, saying let's do it. They began to chant her name out loud as she stood still. Noru continued to watch from the back in silence, but he soon realizes that he was getting tired of this. He tells them to do as they pleased and informs Naya that they should go home, but a hand touches his shoulder and tells him to wait. Kayamaru tells him that she needed him to do something which will be fun. Noru was nervous about what she wanted him to do. A few days later, a simple cottage house is seen in the lands. Two little girls could be seen together on the floor. Two other girls appear and are watching closely to what they were doing. The pair of hands on the legs started to glow brightly. Naya lets out a deep breath, and tells them with a smile on her face that she was fine now and that the wound is healed. The red-haired girl was surprised to see that the burns she had that were so bad was finally healed and back to normal. She hugs Naya to thank her and tells her that she loves her. But Naya tells her that she couldn't accept this since everyone in the village had helped her since she was blind. But the girls cheered her up by that, saying that being able to heal injuries was amazing. They continued to praise her for having such incredible powers and wondered how Naya was able to do it, as it was a mystery. They then changed the topic to Noru. They asked Naya where he was. Naya informs them that Noru seemed busy these days and was often away from home. The girls couldn't believe it and wondered if he was having an affair. But a girl said that it was impossible. It was because Noru was in love with Naya. The other girls agreed, but Naya was hesitant about it. But they continued to tell her that she might never know it. She explains to the group of girls that they say that men think with the lower half of the body, since it was written in a forbidden book. The girls began to ponder about the words lower half. Naya hears this and remains silent before calling up to the girls. Please take me now to where Kayamaru-san is, she said. Noru, good luck boy. Muscle Mommy could be seen gathering a bunch of men together. The other men continued to stare at her. Hey, you bastards, she shouted at them. Are you sure you want to keep living like this? She shouted as she continued to stand firm in front of them. She continued to ask them questions about whether they were really satisfied with their current life of oppression, and if they wanted power, but the villagers told her that they weren't. But Muscle Mommy ignores their opinions, shouting at them that she was going to transform them stupids into the most powerful fighting force in the world. She tells them that they were going to begin training. The first thing was to unify everyone's hearts and minds. She proceeds to tell them to shout with her, the best, little brother. Noru could be seen with a group of men dressed the same. They raised their wooden poles and chanted after Muscle Mommy, the best, little brother. The girl group could only stare at Noru and the men group as they continued to chant together, the best, little brother. Naya looked concerned as she wondered what this was. A mysterious person appeared in the village the other day. It was Kayamura-san. Naya didn't have any particular reason for it, but she had a feeling that she can change something. A suffocating feeling. With a raised fist, Muscle Mommy tells them that they will destroy all archons and control the imperial city. In other words, let's conquer this country. She yells at more men equipped with spears appeared in uniform positions behind her. She continues to shout out to the heavens, if you want power, follow me. I'll make you the strongest fighting group. But the group of villagers just stood still. They whispered amongst themselves about how the imperial city is under control, and about the archons who were the ones who burned down the village the other day. They thought it was impossible for them to beat the archons and wondered what Kayamura was thinking about. But somebody steps forward in the crowd. It was Naya. She looks up to Kayamura and questions her about whether she had any idea about what she was doing fighting an Archon. Muscle Mommy looks at her and soon realizes who Naya was. She tells her that she was going to find out soon. She sends a command out, ordering all of them to get in position. "HA!" shouted the group of men as they moved quick. Noru led the group as they talked about how it was time to demonstrate what they've been training for. Noru looks to the sidelines and tells Naya to watch him and what he could do. "I think our boy forgot that Naya was blind." Awkward. Naya was nervous but agrees to it. Noru gets amped up as he wanted to show Naya his cool side. His eyes began to twitch widely and his face was blushed as he began to think about how this was the perfect opportunity to make her think. Noru is so cool. Shields were then slammed down onto the ground. Muscle Mommy was satisfied with this. She stands in front of the group of men, positioned uniformly and with shields in front of them. She then orders them to have a mock battle, and called for Haps. A familiar foot appears in front of us. Haps had appeared on the battleground alongside with her followers. She smiles as she giggles Kayamura's name with joy. The group of men grew nervous upon the sight of Haps as she asked Muscle Mommy permission to do as she pleased. Kayamura smiles and tells her she didn't care, but instead should give it everything she got. The men started to grow nervous and panicky upon hearing those exchange of words between them. "Good. It's Onee-sama's order." She shouted at her men, "All of you, crush them, do it." She orders as she yells. Her band of merry brothers shouted in joy and began to rush forward to crush the other group. The villagers began to panic as they witnessed the sight of Hap's group rushing towards them. They asked one another about what they should do and that Hap's group would kill them if they did nothing. Noru tells everyone to calm down and to do what they were trained to do. The men agreed with Noru's words and tells each other to get ready. Soon enough, the shields they each held were slammed against one another, creating a massive wall of protection for the group of villagers. They kneeled behind the newly formed shields, waiting for the upcoming attacks. Hap's followers laugh at the villagers' combination of wooden shields, asking them if they thought they could stop them with that. A smile grows on one of their faces as they shouted that they would destroy that, with force, they shouted. Once they slammed their bodies against the combination of wooden shields. "Aura, aura, aura," they yelled continuously as they attacked the wooden shields non-stop. The villagers could barely hold on against the attacks before a hand is raised in the air. Muscle Mommy appears and issues a new command, "Spear posture." She yelled out. Noru and others could be seen following the command immediately. Spears poked out from in between the combination of wooden shields. Hap's men were surprised to see this and wondered what this was. They were shocked to see that the spears were coming out from the gaps in the shields. One after another, Hap's men yelled out that they couldn't get any closer as the villagers continued to poke them with their spears. Muscle Mommy then issues a new command, V-shaped battle formation. The villagers agreed immediately and started to change their formations. Kayamura commentated that real wars are fought with weapons. However, the one who knows how to use the weapons better wins. The villagers had managed to successfully form a barricade made up of their wooden shields to corner Haps and her group into the middle. Haps' followers were alarmed to realize that the villagers were actually pretty tough to deal with. Haps wore an annoyed expression on her face due to her situation. She lets out a fiery explosion that causes her allies to jump out of the way due to its hotness. She smirks and tells her troops that she was enough to beat the group of villagers. She continues to show off her flaming powers in front of the villager group. The villagers could only stare with their mouths wide open. They argued with one another about what to do as Haps came closer to them. Kayamura begins to speak out about being on the battlefield. She asks the crowd from before about what was the most effective weapon, a sword, a spear, a shovel. The answer is, the flashback ends as Haps shouts at the villagers, telling them that she was going to turn all of them into charcoal. But something quick speeds through the air. An arrow had landed directly into the forehead of Haps. A look of confusion came over her as she was stunned about what was going on right now. Even her group of followers were shocked to witness what just happened. Silence fell upon the battlefield as everyone was too stunned to speak. Her followers began to crowd around her, slowly calling out her name. Kayamura announces that the most powerful weapon on the battlefield is always a flying one. Just as a female ninja with two big reasons to like her appears, hiding in the trees with a bow drawn, everyone on the battlefield looked up to the female ninja and stared at her in silence. Muscle Mommy explains to them that if the arrow was real, Haps would have been dead, so the result was a victory for the villagers' team. The villagers rejoiced with pride upon hearing the results, while Haps couldn't believe it. She throws the arrow down and started to curse. "Shit, shit, shit," she yells as she stomps her foot repeatedly onto the arrow. The villagers who were watching were speechless. But they soon realized something even though they couldn't understand it very well. but under Kayamaru's guidance, simple villagers were able to defeat an Archon. Night soon arrives in the world. So, what did you think, Naya? Shouted a voice from inside of a house. Noru tells her that they had defeated an Archon as his face was filled with excitement, but Naya was hesitating to reply him. Afterwards she tells him that she couldn't really understand what he was doing. This shocks Noru, but he soon realizes Naya was right as she literally couldn't see anything. Naya went to comfort Noru as Kayamaru asked him if his stomach hurts. Hap stood at attention and wanted to ask her something. She asks her if it was okay to pretend to lose like that. Muscle Mommy tells her that it was alright and that she did a good job. Noru was shocked to hear that. He questions them about whether the entire fight was an act. Kayamaru tells him that it was. She tells Noru that even though Hap's group was weak, they wouldn't have lost against the villagers. Haps agrees with her. Noru drops to his knees and was sad over this fact. He had really believed that they had beaten an Archon, but Kayamaru tells him that it was possible. This piques his interest as he looks up. She tells him that they didn't have enough time, but with a real armed force, they can win. She explains to him that where he came from, someone who could shoot flames out of the hand would be killed in an instant. An image of a man holding the power of America is seen blasting Hap's head. Haps was alarmed to hear this. She questions Muscle Mommy if this was true. Naya started to speak out as well. She asks her if she could become stronger too, strong enough to not be defeated by the Archons. Of course, said Muscle Mommy, miracles are created by force. She says with a look of confidence in her eye and a smile on her face. The sun rises on a new day. A nice-looking Japanese's temple is seen. A group of muscular men with masks are seen kneeling on the ground. Who, said a voice from some sweet lips. A new mommy appears. This was the Archon called Kama/Mara. She asks her followers if Hephaestus was defeated by humans. She tells her followers that after all, someone with the name of a lower god is insignificant. She proclaims herself as the Mao, who will control the empire. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.